Hi everyone. So yesterday I did a video on the true nature of power, and I want to follow it with a complementary video on the true nature of strength, because I made it clear in the video yesterday that power is not strength and strength is not power. And I want to make this distinction very clear. What are they? And how do they work together? Now, strength is more down to earth, it's more masculine, it comes and it goes. And so I've actually put a different background here from where my family lives in Thailand, in Phetchabun province, an extraordinary temple there, of which this is only a very, very small part. And strength. Now, one of the things I didn't mention yesterday was power is the ability and the willingness to act. That's a simple definition of it. It's not the action, it's having the ability and the willingness to act, like love and will put into action. It's the love and will that empowers the action. It's the use of freedom with responsibility that empowers the action. But the ability to take action in a sustainable, continuous way is strength. So power changes things fast. Strength enables you to endure while things change slowly. And it's definitely a more masculine energy. It comes in the masculine. Now, one of the things I said very clearly yesterday was, if you have these amazing strengths and it's not plugged into power, it's going nowhere. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine who's into elite sports performance, and we work with Human Design a lot on top sports people and analysing why they are the way they are, and, you know, really seeing the unique gifts they bring to the field and the different types of sports events that suit different types. And we were talking about in his Facebook group, he was talking about when teams choke. You know, they get to the grand final or the Super Bowl and they're against a team they should beat easily and they choke. Or the best player in the world goes to kick a penalty and they miss. And these things happen in sport as a fairly regular part of sport. You know, even the best players have their down times. And one of the things I did was actually send to him the video I did yesterday on power and say that when athletes choke, it's not because their skill suddenly disappears. They're still just as, look, it could be because of what they're thinking, the way they're treated, the energy in the team, you know, the lack of synergy there, the whatever, any number of things. But all of those things do one thing: they unplug you from power. And that's where you see teams that usually perform at an exceptional level put in a bad performance or lose an event they should do well in. Or a surfer who's one of the top surfers in the world wipes out on a wave where he normally wouldn't. Now, being unplugged from power, that's why masculine energy needs to be empowered by feminine energy. But masculine energy, whether it's in men or women, has these 12 strengths that it can work with. and 2 other aspects as well. And these 12 strengths you'll see in the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 gods in Olympus in Greek mythology, the 12 knights of the Round Table in the Arthurian legend. Wherever you see groups of 12, the 12, from midnight to noon, 12 hours. And these 12 strengths, I'm not going to go into in a lot of detail because there is a lot of detail you can go into there, but that requires time and experience and working with that energy so that it clicks. This is why Arthur, when he was a young boy, was taken by Merlin into the forest and taught these 12 skills on how that made him a strong man, even in his teens. And those qualities were really important. And they're important for the development of any man or the masculine energy in any person. So I'm going to touch on the 12. And those of you who know a bit about astrology or the gods or whatever it is that you know about, you can look at these. But these are strengths. And when they're empowered, they make a real difference in how civilizations work. Now, I'm going to look into that a little more deeply just before we go into the strengths. Because civilization, look, there are 3 major things. Our tradition, who we are and where we came from, whatever you think that means. But it goes deeply, deeply back into our soul and our spirit and our history, where we come from and where we're going. And then there's our connection with the earth, because this is where we live. That gets our feet back on the ground. And then there's this third thing called civilization, when human beings start to cluster together and have to work together. And a civilization is defined as a complex society characterized. Now, this is straight out of, Wikipedia or out of development, that you'll find information you'll find on the internet. A complex society characterized by urban development, or putting it simply, human beings clustering together in more than a cave or tents. But they start creating towns and then cities. Fair enough. They definitely have their uses. The second part is social stratification imposed by a cultural elite. Now, that arises out of losing contact with your tradition and nature, both of which are sources of power, and creating a cultural elite that imposes social stratification on the people in the urban development. This is one of the major weaknesses in civilization. You wouldn't think so, but it is. It creates problem after problem after problem. And when you get people who have elite skills and unique cultures, and every one of them finds a place that isn't imposed but is where they fit, that's where the civilization thrives. And that's what knowing your strength. Everybody's got power, but knowing your unique strength or aspects of strengths that you bring to the table, that enables that imposition of social stratification to become a natural finding of where people fit best because they have those skills. You know, they could be a ruler because it's natural for them to rule for the benefit of all. They could be a carpenter because they love working with wood. It's just, I love it. And I like being out in the woods, or I like being in a very complicated, complex family or community. I thrive there. Now, the third thing is there's symbolic systems of communication, such as writing, for instance, and numbers. No problem with that. There's all sorts of different varieties of that, but, you know, good communication certainly helps. And then the last thing is a perceived separation from and domination over the natural environment. Again, this creates this separation from power, which diffuses strength into trying to dominate, trying to be stronger than. Then it's survival of the strongest, not survival of those most suited to a particular environment because that's where they thrive. You know, survival of the fittest, it's not true. It's survival of those who fit best in a particular environment. They'll survive better. And so you get this social stratification imposed by cultural elites who are striving for power, but it's actually, I want to be stronger than anybody else and I want to impose my will on other people. And urban development that disconnects us from nature, again, we're going to have to find the power in other things. And those weaken us. So let that in. Strength, the opposite of strength or the lack of strength is weakness. I said this yesterday. The lack of power is powerlessness. The lack of strength is weakness. So men or male energy or masculine energy can be very strong and it can be weak. Feminine energy can be powerful and feel powerless. It is powerful, but sometimes feels powerless. And therefore you get this lust for power. And then there's strength. And when it feels weak, on some level, there's this striving to become stronger rather than let's find true power, let's find true strength. And use those to turn out the strength, to turn our weaknesses into assets, and our sense of powerlessness to turn our powerlessness into an asset, into a power. Often it's the way we discover our true powers is identifying the places where we were young, where we felt powerless, and we compensated by creating all sorts of strategies to get by. And it's often a great place to say, oh, you compensated in that way because this is your natural power. Well, these are your natural strengths. And the very first one of them is honesty. It takes strength to be honest. And remember, strength is over time. So honesty takes consistent honesty. It's not being honest once. It's developing the habit of being honest. Now, I could give a whole hour talk on that alone, Luke, but I just want you to take this in and see what it brings up in you. Is that something you're strong at or weak at? Because if you find it easy to lie or to be dishonest with yourself, there's so much you can learn, there's so much strength you can develop. Or you can seek those people in your life and learn it from them who are honest and see the benefits of it. It's not about you should or you'll be punished. It's more like there are so many benefits to being honest. The second one is loyalty. This is, valuable is understatement. Loyalty takes strength, just like you've got to be strong to be honest. Loyalty takes strength, but it also enables you to work with power, which is another story for another time. Loyalty is a very valuable commodity. And you need the strength to be loyal to what you're designed to be loyal to, what's right for you to be loyal to. That's why you've got to be honest. Hey, you can develop loyalty to anything randomly, but first that honesty, then it leads you to be loyal. Now, a person with honesty and loyalty, the third is dignity. It's in some ways, it's like Jordan Peterson saying, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Well, that's part of being honesty in that, but there's a certain dignity that when you're straight, you're honest, and you're loyal, it gives you a sense of dignity. It's expressed in your body language. It's not just the clothes that you wear that happen to fit in what everybody else thinks is royal or whatever. There's a way you carry yourself with dignity. And that takes strength to operate with dignity consistently over time. And then you have virtue. Now, virtue it's a strength as well. Again, these are old-fashioned words, and I'm not going to go into defining them now, but I want you to let that, not only the traditional meaning of those words, if you're old enough to know that, or if you're not, go back and study what they traditionally meant. Now, that won't be that accurate, to be honest, but it'll give you at least some clues on where to look. What is virtue? To not let people take advantage of you, to have morals, but it's a strength. It's not something you have to be. It's something you can develop as a strength within yourself, virtue. And someone who has dignity and virtue, a person can be dignified but have no virtue and come across as incredibly arrogant. That's the end result. Looking down your nose at somebody. A lot of English culture in the past and the French, and you'll find it everywhere, all around the world. But when you have dignity with true virtue, rather than arrogance, it becomes grace. The ability to do what comes naturally to you. Because you're honest, you're loyal, that gives you dignity and virtue. There's substance within the dignity. It's not just put on. And then you're able to do what comes naturally to you, able to operate gracefully. In the past, they used to have these terms like your grace, which means grace was expected of that person and sometimes embodied by that person. And when it was in, you see that with dancers or great sports people. When they're playing a sport, when they're dancing, it's when they're moving, or some people have that presence. They carry themselves with grace. It's like they're just being themselves. And yet, you know, the sun is like that. It just radiates. It is what it is at the center of the solar system, and it just radiates. That's what's natural for it to do. And when you have grace, you have the strength to face the truth. And facing the truth is a strength. It's not a power, it's a strength. It's something you develop over time. And it can come and it can go. You know, we all, as we grow older, lose some of our natural grace, although I've seen very, very old people who just radiate dignity and virtue and grace. And you look in their eyes and they know the truth. I had a grandmother, my grandmother was someone like that. I've told the story before, but when my first marriage broke up, and I'm part of a Catholic family, and she'd given birth to 13 children, and she was 95. She died at 97. She was sitting in bed. My father didn't quite know what to do with it, being one of her 13 children. So he brought me into Grandma, put me on a chair and ran out of the room, right? And Grandma just looked at me and went, "Is it done?" Now, here's a woman who'd been a Catholic woman all her life, been to church all her life, followed everything, you know, had an incredibly successful husband who was the editor of the biggest newspaper one of the biggest newspapers in the whole of Australia at the time. You know, the equivalent of the New York Times or something. And she'd seen it all, lost 2 sons in the war, had hundreds of grandchildren, literally. I know, I was at the parties. Right? I was one of them, and I'm sitting down there and she just says, "Is it done?" And I go, "Grandma, what? What is it done? What am I even sitting here? I've never really had time with you before, much on my own." And she looked at me and she said, "Your marriage, is it done?" And I went, wow, where did this come from? I wasn't expecting that. And I went, honesty, yeah, it is. And she looked right into me, took a breath and dismissed me. Truth. She knew I was telling the truth. She told me the truth. What can I do to help? It's done, it's done. Forget about the beliefs and the da-da-da and all the other stuff. It's like, the truth is, it's finished. So get on with your life and let me finish mine, thanks. Nice to see you. You know, truth. It's a strength, telling the truth. It's a strength people lack at the moment on a large scale. Not people in general, but, you know, you look at the media, you look at politics, you look, you know, it's a strength that when it's empowered is very practical because it cuts through all the crap. And then when you're able to tell the truth, when you have that strength, the next strength that flows is courage. In a sense, you learn these and they build on each other. Just like I said yesterday with the video on power, from 1 to 9. Well, the 7th strength is courage. when you have the strength to be truthful, it builds courage. Now, unlike what you'd normally expect, becoming courageous doesn't mean you just start stomping all over everybody. Because when you have the courage to face the truth of what's natural to you, what the strength that develops on top of that is, it's called courtesy. Now, courtesy isn't just, being courteous. Courtesy is valuing yourself and valuing the other person even though they're different. That takes strength. That's what's at the core of business and negotiation, even healing. Facing the truth with courage means you can deal with it with courtesy. My God, I thought I should be this way, but this is where my health is at. So I face the truth, have the courage to relate to it, and that means I can deal with my body's needs, my mind's needs, the needs of the people around me. They'll all have different opinions. You can listen to each of them. But do yourself the courtesy of being true to yourself. It's very deep and profound. Like loyalty is so valuable. Courtesy is so capable of valuing others, which is a strength. To have the strength to find the value in another person rather than just criticize, put down, try to take out, you name it. And, pardon me, what flourishes from there is gallantry. Now that's a really, it's not a modern word that's used a lot anyway these days. It's rather an old-fashioned word. But gallant, it's gallant, it's expansive, it's, ta-da, I'm here. And I see, I'm willing to look at the big picture and to express my perspective, to express my beliefs, and at the same time listen to other people. It's giving the permission to yourself to say what you truly believe, to speak up and share your perspective, and at the same time allow people to share theirs. And it's not about warfare, it's not about win-lose. Gallant is looking for everyone benefiting, educating, inspiring people. And when you have that quality, the courage, the courtesy, the gallantry, the strength that emerges, this is where it really gels and matures. This is where you've gone through 9 dimensions similar to power, but there's more with strength. It's not that one's better than the other in any way. It's just there's more to get together. And that's when authority kicks in. That takes strength. Now, you might think of authority as dominating other people or imposing social stratification on others. That's not authority. One thing human design really shows people is how to trust the authority they have within them. That takes strength. to listen to your own authority. And out of respecting that, to respect other people's authority. And that builds the capacity for people to be in the right place at the right time. And when it comes to external authority, to be in the right place, to take things in the right way for you. And who ends up in the positions of authority in society, in civilization? People who are willing to be responsible and use that authority, have the strength to exercise, is probably the best way of putting it, to exercise that authority. In a way that brings out the very best in everybody. I'm here to decide what will benefit everybody. And I need that wisdom and inspiration that gallantry brings, the courtesy and the courage and the insight the truth gives you. But be graceful and virtuous and dignified and loyal and most of all honest. That old story of the two women arguing about whose child it was and the king saying, "I'll split them down the middle." It's like, no one else could say that, but he's the authority. And it's like, and then the truth comes out. Because the woman whose child it was would rather the child live. We get authority mixed up with power over and domination, strength over, rather than the strength to take on responsibility, to preserve freedom. And then once you have authority, and this starts to kick it all into position, the next strength is the strength to serve. It's service. It takes strength to serve, not to be a servant, but to be of service. You have authority in order to serve. You have gallantry in order to see enough of the big picture that you can take authority. You have courtesy so that you can not only see things from your point of view, but other people's point of view, which takes courage. And you can see how they just build one upon the other. And if you're going to serve the last of the 12 strengths, humility. Now, you might think that that's nothing to do with being humiliated. It's the ability to be able to relax and to serve something, to work with something greater than yourself over time, to serve people, to see what that does when it's done with honesty, loyalty, dignity, virtue, grace, with truth, with courage, with courtesy, with gallantry, with authority, and to serve. It humbles you. And are you strong enough to be humbled, and then humbled again, and then humbled again? Not humiliated, but humbled by what you're capable of supporting being created. Now that is masculine strength. And there's aspects of that in sport and in boxing and in lifting weights and many aspects of that. When you look for them, you see the people who are great You'll see certain dimensions of that. And if they don't, they eventually grow old and go through all the others. Well, I've got to face the truth. I can't just punch the hell out of anybody and make as much money as I like. So maybe I'll go into business. Maybe I'll educate people, train people. Maybe I'll get drunk. That'll humiliate me, lead me to humility. Or you put them together throughout your life. Now, if the fundamentals of this can be taught to children, particularly young men, but to women as well, so that they understand their masculine energy. It's not about beating men at their own game. You don't have to. You're the source of power. Men need you. You don't necessarily need them, but they do have the strength to support you fully in being creative. So it's fun. But the men, they develop their strength. They bring those qualities of dignity, courtesy, loyalty that make living a human life so rich and full and expansive. And to die with dignity, to die with grace, to die with humility. That's a person who has really, how can I put this in, what are exactly the right words for this? Someone who's lived life and loved it, who's acted upon the gift of life and not only received but given so much back to it. That's added value by their presence, through their actions. Now, if you teach people early enough, young men and young women, they can put these together and integrate them. And in the old days, that used to be called chivalry. The chivalrous person was someone who pulled all that together. Now, chivalry today means a lot of ideas, but someone who was chivalrous was a truly strong person. In those days, it was a strong man. People did not have to fear him unless they threatened other people or threatened him. But fear wasn't how he gained respect. It was through his chivalry. And then there's one more aspect to true strength. So there's those 12 dimensions, integrating them together, the 13th. And then the 14th dimension of real strength is openness to receive power. Power is not, how can I put this, opposed to strength. Particularly, it loves to see people develop strength. It loves to see strength grow and integrate. And it says there's no need for opposition. All you need to be willing to do is receive empowerment, because that will give all the power you need to live your strength rich and full to its full potential. Now, I've only been able to touch on it as I was only able to touch on power last night. But exploring this for decades in my life, way after I would have loved to have learned it when I was young, it's given me respect for myself and a lot of respect for human beings. Now, we don't always live up to that. None of us do. I don't, you know. But it shows us what we're truly made of and what we're capable of realizing. And later on in videos and in programs I'm doing, in the Power Cauldron program where we really went into power, at least started to explore that, we didn't mention this, except that power and strength are not the same. But they're so valuable and so important that they've been embodied in legends, the gods in the 12 gods of Olympus, 12 knights of the round, the 12 disciples in Christianity, the 12 signs of the zodiac. It's so important that these lessons are taught to human beings so that their masculine energy becomes healthy and strong. But it's the feminine energy that turns it on so they can realize their full potential. And so that feminine energy needs to be treated with incredible respect. But that's what a truly strong masculine energy, that's what a truly strong man does, is he treats the feminine, whether it's the women in his life, the environment, not idealistically, not because it's all up in his head and he thinks that this is going to save the world or stop the oceans rising. No, it comes from his heart, from his spirit. Power from the soul, strength from the spirit. And together they have this incredible dance that can create civilization unlike anything that we've experienced till now. Only what we've dreamed of, wrote stories about, thought about. But the actual realization and embodiment of that that's happening now in history, not overnight, but it's happening, is so much richer than we could have imagined. There's so much depth and beauty, magic, logic, so much joy to be had in living at that level. And it's something worthy of human beings not only to aspire to, but at this point in history, to step up to and embrace. Because the time has come to treat power with the respect due to it and recognize it for what it is and develop strength over time so that we can truly enjoy life and contribute to it. So rather than take the environment apart, we add to it, just like the temple in the background here. Hope that was helpful and talk to you again soon.